Rachel Gibler is a spiritual entrepreneur and the host of It's Effin' Spiritual. Yeah, you heard that right. And she came highly recommended by a previous guest, Jamie Gruber, and for good reason. After losing her father in a tragic accident in her teenage years, she faced a lot of challenges, including substance abuse, abusive relationships, and even a serious injury that left her bedridden for several months. But Rachel used that time to invest in learning about that mind, and how many successful entrepreneurs did a lot of internal work and understand how the subconscious mind works. Yeah, y'all know what kind of interview this is going to be. No apologies. Rachel is now on a mission to make personal development and spirituality accessible and not so boring. In this conversation, we dig into somatic healing and why ambitious creatives can learn from Rachel's experience and slow down a little bit and heal so that we can speed it up. This, my friends, is Rachel Gibler.
Realize that there's so much in the unseen realm is actually that we're co-creating with. This isn't the fulfillment that I thought that I would feel. There has to be something deeper here.
Do you put your life on pause to get healed, and then you can create? Or how do you create from a pure place when there's still so much shit inside of you that needs healing? I have been, I don't know if it's selfish, but I have been unapologetic. Let's put it that way. I've been unapologetic about bringing in just as much diversity and trying to figure, because I'm so torn on what I believe right now. And I'm going through my own, whatever you want to call it. I've had about 15 awakenings. So I guess another awakening, but I'm always just have so many questions. And that's why I loved you, Rachel. And I heard you while I was researching another guest. I said, there is something really special about this person. I always love good questions when people are genuinely curious and they're off script and whatever, because there's a skill set there that is obvious with you. There is a very real, honest, human element you bring to the spiritual world. And I know it sounds weird, but sometimes when I listen to people talk about spirituality, I want to punch myself. But I believe in it. And I believe everything is spiritual. Like you said, there's no denying it. But it's like, how do we enter into this conversation from a very human place? I think you have done just a fantastic job. And I've been thrilled to get to know you vicariously more by listening to your shows and digging into your work, and just tickled that you would spend a few minutes with me, Rachel. I have a bunch of questions for you. I know you're hot and passionate about a bunch of stuff right now, so we're going to just kill it in the next 50 minutes. But thank you. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us.
Oh, thank you for the reflection, Heather, and for having me.
All right. So I'll save it to the end, something I really need to ask you. It's pressing. So we'll lead up into that. But when I asked you a moment ago that you what you were passionate about right now, you said somatic healing. And before y'all click off this and you're like, oh, listen, I've had several people over the past few months bring this up to me and said that I need to go through it, that I need some healing there. And I don't really even know if I know much what somatic healing is. So when you said that, Rachel, I'm like, well, hot freaking dog, what is somatic healing?
First, I just want to preface for everyone listening to this, I came from a background, I was not woo-woo at all. I was not spiritual at all. I was not into this stuff. I didn't even believe in this stuff. I thought it was a bunch of kind of bullshit, you know?
Why? Why did you think it was bullshit?
So I'll give a little bit of background on my story. I grew up and I would have considered myself atheist. I would have considered myself no belief outside of myself, and would have, kind of almost scoffed at this kind of personal development stuff. Now, looking back, that was when I was a teenager, but I went through my own deep, dark night of the soul when I lost my father in a freak accident when I was 16. And that turned me to drug and alcohol abuse. It turned me to abusive relationships. No part of my life was going well. By the time I was in my early 20s, I'm working a corporate job that I hated, binge drinking on the weekends, had only party friends around me. And something in my soul was you are meant for a bigger life. You're meant to do something greater, and you're meant to share your story. Yeah. Eventually, I was in my own freak accident at the age of 23, which woke me up to desiring to change my life. And ever since then, I have been on a deep path of healing. But I say that for the listeners to know that like I was someone that had to build my own belief in not only a power outside of myself and spirituality, but also in the power that we have to heal ourselves. Like I had to slowly, incrementally build my belief over time and change what I believed was possible for me, change my own level of self-worth, change the way that I saw myself, and changed my own belief in possibility, essentially. And what that looked like is like I started with the front door of self-development, goals, affirmations, journal, all the things that I call it like the very hyper masculine front door of self-development, right? And this is really beautiful to know for people listening to this too, right? If they're listening to your show, they probably are some version of wanting to better themselves, wanting to make an impact, right? Wanting to create a life that they love, right? I know that you have incredible guests on that talk about those things. So we already know that everybody that's listening to this podcast, like probably believes in some form of like self-development, growth mindset, wanting to self-actualize or become the best version of themselves, right? So that's how I entered into this work. And from that, then I started to get into more manifestation. But because I didn't believe in the woo-woo stuff, I was very like, I got to find the scientific, really everything I do is based in science and backed by research. Because I, again, like had to build my belief I wasn't just going to blindly accept that, like how a lot of people that you'll hear in the spiritual realm, like, oh, it's your angels. Oh, it's your guide. Oh, like the universe just has your back. I was like, no, I need to know why. I need to know what you're talking about. Like, I wasn't just somebody that blindly accepted those things. And so I got into more manifestation, but through the realm of quantum physics, neuroscience, neurolinguistic programming, how to reprogram the subconscious. So a big bulk of the work that I did for about 4 to 5 years was studying the brain, studying our reticular activating system, like studying the parts of our brain that allow us to filter out and like create a new reality. And as you study those things, you'll start to realize that there's so much in the unseen realm that is actually that we're co-creating with. So about 5 years into this journey, I find myself in my vision board reality. I have the beautiful home that I had on my vision board. I moved to the city that I dreamed of. I have the incredible community. I have the business. I have the certain number of downloads on my podcast, right? I've checked the boxes. I've done the things. And yet I'm like still crying in my beautiful home going, is this it? I checked the boxes of my vision board and this isn't the fulfillment that I thought that I would feel. There has to be something deeper here. Now, something else to note at the same time, I had built my company, was still scaling my company. And the place that I was operating from was push, hustle, and force. It was through gripping and forcing and controlling. And so I ended up burning out in this process. So when I realized, oh my God, all of this typical like manifestation or self-development stuff is a Band-Aid for the actual true healing that I believe most people really desire, there has to be something deeper here. And that led me into somatics and into nervous system regulation. And what somatics is somatics, the soma, is another word for the body. If you've heard of the book, The Body Keeps the Score.
You're right.
It's a really famous book. In this space. And it's basically about how trauma is stored in our body and in our being. So much of the self-development, subconscious reprogramming, like that world is from what we call a top-down approach, meaning from the mind into the body. So it says, reprogram your mind, reprogram your subconscious, and you will get what you want in your life. That's the general rule of thumb, right? Look at your vision board. Say your affirmations, do the things as a top-down approach. But what they're failing to mention, there's also, we need to heal from the bottom up. So heal from the body first, and then the mind will follow. The beliefs will follow, and then the actions and behaviors will follow. So somatics is the study of actually releasing unprocessed emotions that are stored in the body and coming back into really like wholeness with yourself. And the nervous system is a lot of what is driving that. So many people live in a fight, flight, freeze response. So we go throughout many of those even throughout one day. But our typical nervous system responses are if we're living in a state of dysregulation, which I certainly was, it ends up driving our actions. And that's why it can feel empty at the end of the day, because we're not coming from a state of aliveness. We're coming from a state of force or control.
I'm just going to keep it super real with you. Like, I'm hardcore masculine energy. I understand I need some feminine energy. I'm working on it, y'all. Y'all know I'm working on it. Masculine energy has gotten me somewhere that has overcome all the crap and the shit. And I'm indebted to it. And I'm so grateful for it because I had to crawl out of a hole. And I feel like the masculine energy gave me the strength to be able to build what I've built and come from where I came from. I know you know what I'm talking about. So now, you know, I was at Rob, I don't know if you know Rob Bell. I was at Rob Bell's thing a few months ago, and he just looked at me and he's like, what served you then is not serving you now, girl. And I'm like, damn it. I know you're right. But there's a level of where fear it comes in about like achievement and when you're goal oriented. And when I'm with you, girl, like growing up, I had that voice of like, there's something. And I've just felt drawn to do great things. And there's a lot of resistance that I feel when it comes to like doing deeper work because I feel like it's going to slow me down. And I know that's BS. I know it's wrong. But I'm just curious from like one high achieving gal to another, like how do you process through that? Because the masculine serves something and putting it down to me sounds scary.
It's not about putting down the masculine. It's about understanding how to have a balance of the energies between the two. Mm-hmm. And the masculine serves, right? We get to honor the part of your masculine that like was like, I got myself out of a hole. I needed to take care of myself, right? Yeah. Masculine energy is, right? And we all have masculine energy. It has nothing to do with gender. Masculine energy is a part that protects, provides, leads, creates, like it drives forward a mission, a goal, a purpose. And so many people, myself included, when we had to take care of ourselves, fend for ourselves, see the vision, right? The masculine leads to a vision.
Right.
That's really beautiful. And we get to honor and be so grateful for that part of ourselves. And also know that it's not one or the other. It's not like, okay, now I'm going to shut my masculine off and I'm going to like, no, go be feminine, right? And that was a misconception that I always had too, was like, oh my gosh, like now I'm wanting to walk this more feminine path. And the feminine is this like, it's the feeler. She's the,
right.
She's the intuition. She's the seer, the one that like, she is the wave, right? That like has all of the different emotion, but she's also can see so much of what the masculine can't see, right? So she relies on intuition and truth. And so when you have those two parts of yourself that are married together, right? Like the masculine is like the push force when it's in the shadow. The feminine, the feminine's in the shadow, she's in the damsel in distress. But when the feminine is in her true power, right? She is in her spine, but also soft and loving and can see and have an intuition. So when we marry those two, then we actually can create from a place of being able to honor, know, trust our intuition, be able to breathe, be able to feel, be able to be calm, and also be able to drive something forward. So it's not necessarily about like negating the masculine quality, but you know, my question would be, and not that you have to answer it now, but for anybody that's wondering this is, okay, so the masculine has gotten you somewhere, right? If we're a seeker, if we're somebody that you're obviously going to these events, there's a reason why the response was, oh, what got you here won't get you there. So what is that gap, right? Like, why is there a desire there? Because it's like, how are you actually feeling at night? How are you actually feeling during your days? How are your relationships? Right. How are you like starting to ask these questions? And for me, what made me really desire to walk the path of the feminine, which also has a lot to do with somatics because it's about feeling, is this fear of like, oh my God, I'm going to be stuck in it forever, or like, then I'm just not going to be able to achieve or any of that. Mm-hmm. And what I realized is that it's the feminine isn't about what you do. It's about how you do it and the frequency in which you do it. Yeah. The energy that you bring. So yeah, I wonder if that clarifies your question.
Wait. Yeah, totally. And I to go into the somatic part of it, I think for me, getting out of the logic behind healing, because, you know, I've done so many groups and talks, and I've read hundreds of books. Unbelievable amount. I mean, the rabbit hole, girl. Like, I've done a lot of that work, and I've overcome a lot, a whole lot. But there's this extra little piece, and this is where friends have been like, you need this somatic stuff, and you need to get some of that unconscious whatever is going on healed. That's what I don't fully understand, and I guess the reason I'm curious about it is because it's the next step for me. I mean, right. But break it down for me a little bit more. Like, I get, okay, let's say, and I'm just going to pull this out of my butt. Let's say there's something energetically, I guess, a part of my body, something's trapped inside of my body. How do you identify it? And then how do you actually heal it? Is it like months and months of talk therapy? Is it doing shrooms? Like, what is it?
So somatics is an overarching term, right? So the way that I might help people is going to be different than the next person who, talks about somatics, right? Or facilitates. For me, learning how to feel again is a long process, especially when we have been in a state of fight or flight and maybe have negated our emotions or pushed down our emotions or ignored our emotions for a really long time, numbed our emotions, right? So many people live dissociated from their emotions. I scroll, I overwork, I stay constantly busy, I overshop, overspend, overdrink, overeat, whatever those like overindulgent things are, right? There's different parts that are adaptations that make us negate our emotions or not feel them or numb them in some capacity. So what somatics is it's the ability to resensitize yourself to feeling what's there again. And feeling what's there and feeling what's underneath, which it can sound really scary, and it's so liberating on the other side because we have these parts of ourselves that literally adapt in order to protect us. And it's about feeling what's underneath the protective parts in order to actually heal them. So for me, what that looks like is I'm not like doing a ceremony and doing sessions where I'm like, you have something blocked in your heart chakra. Like I don't do any of that. Some people might, but for me, it's about holding a safe space for people to understand scientifically what's happening in their body on a nervous system level, and also just holding a space where somebody can start to feel and be in their body again. So I facilitate what looks like someone like breathing and getting into their body. It might have a little bit of like hypnosis, visualization, like I might be taking someone through a process, or my group program will take a group of women through this process. And something that's confusing about this to people that live in their logical mind, which was always me as well. I was like, science, explain it. Like, I want to figure it out, right? That's how our society just is. It's like, let me know the steps from A to B. Let me figure it out. How long is this going to take? Like, let me know how to do this. And it's not a logical thing because our feelings aren't necessarily logical. Everybody's experience is going to be different. So it's literally learning how to start to listen to the body again. Start to like breathe into what's there. I do a lot of work with the breath. Somatics is rooted in breath, sound, and movement, which is the primordial language. So the language before we had words, like when we were cavemen, breath, sound, and movement. So it's a form of using the breath, using sound or movement to move energy through the body and learning what's there and learning how to feel. And through that, you might have memories arise. You might have nothing arise. You might have resistance arise. And so even in, say, like the resistance, the process that I teach is we learn how to feel, and then we take the part that surfaces and start to work with it. So say if you have a resistance to doing this, the resistance is a protective adaptation, a protective part that is protecting something other underneath that it doesn't want you to feel. So it's learning how to get to know the protective mechanisms and the protective parts. And then eventually, once the body feels safe, learning how to feel what's underneath. When you feel what's underneath, you can release it and you come back into more wholeness with yourself.
You said that you talk different, you move in this world different. So to me, that says it's not just about healing X, it's about becoming something different. And I'm curious, like, if you could explain a little bit more about that. part?
Yeah, I think it's about becoming more of who you truly are. If I can explain the process of kind of what happens to us on this planet. So we come to the world, whole, perfect, complete, right? You look at a baby and that baby is just beautiful and expressed. Like a baby cries when it wants to cry. It screams when it wants to scream. It's not worried about what it looks like in the grocery store, right? It's not worried. It expresses its feelings. It emotes. It has desires. It's, you look at even like a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old typically is really expressed in their being, right? They're in their true essence. And then somewhere along the way, the ages 0 to 7 are when we are a walking subconscious mind. We are a sponge. We are imprinting everything about our reality. And at the same time, we're internalizing everything because we don't have the ability to have a critical thinking. So anything that happens, we take it on as truth about ourselves.
Yeah.
What happens when you go from being this really expressed toddler child, then something happens, right? Your parent is mean to you. Kids on the playground make fun of you. You could say a big T trauma, something really traumatic happens, or little T trauma, or what didn't happen, right? Which was the case for me. I always thought I had a beautiful childhood growing up. My trauma didn't happen until I was a teenager after my dad died. No, it's not actually true. I didn't get my emotional needs validated in childhood, but I didn't even know that because I grew up with 2 parents in a loving home, or so I thought. So trauma can also be what didn't happen. So when a child doesn't get their emotional needs met, they don't get validated in the way that, or they're told that they have to be something else other than themselves, right? So when that happens, think of it as a fragment in the being. So if you were to imagine we come here whole, perfect, and complete, and for a visual, let's just say that's a tree trunk. Okay, like we're whole, we're sturdy. Like, I don't know why this is always what comes to me when I explain this. Then when a wound happens, someone makes fun of us, big T, little t trauma, we decide something about ourselves. I'm not good enough, right? I'm not worthy, whatever that is. We chip away at that tree trunk, right? It makes a little like mark. And then another one happens, another mark, until over time, now we're seeing the lens, we're seeing the world through a certain lens of what we believe about ourselves because we've internalized it. And then we go throughout our lives, then you become a teenager, you become a young adult, and then all of a sudden it seems like these patterns keep showing up, but it's because there was a certain belief that you created about yourself in childhood that is no fault to you, but that now you're seeing through that lens and reaffirming it over and over and over again. So it'll show up in relationships. It'll show up in the way that you handle money. It'll show up in the way that you handle work, the way that you go after your dreams or don't, the way that you like all these different things we create adaptations. So the adaptation could be the procrastinator, the perfectionist, the over-controller, the inner critic. All those parts come in to try to manage. I don't ever want to feel what I felt in childhood. And this is all happening subconsciously. But I don't ever want to feel not good enough. So now I have an adaptation of a protective part that wants to be perfectionist, right? Or an adaptation of a part that always overindulges and I just go to the bars and drink, even though deep down I know like this isn't good for me and I actually really want to be an artist or whatever, right? But I've never peaked or whatever that is, right? And so think of it as you are now in your adulthood and you are this beautiful tree that now has a bunch of splinters. And what we do when we do somatic work, we get to know those protective parts. So those adaptations, the resistances that come up. And once you get acquainted with those, and then we go underneath and we start to feel what that child never got to feel because it gets frozen in time when we are 4, 5, 6, and it gets stuck in the body. So we're literally going back and feeling the parts of ourselves that didn't get to feel in the moment and healing them. And then really we begin the process of reparenting what we didn't get. And then those splinters begin to heal and heal and heal. So the wound that's originally really big, it's like layers of an onion. You heal it, it gets smaller, it gets smaller, it gets smaller. And the true you comes more into wholeness, more into wholeness, more into wholeness until you become so much more rooted in your own knowing. And then a byproduct of that is that you become expressed. You become naturally free to be who you actually are and who you always were and who you came here as, but in this adult, knowing, trusting self, right? That now is integrated with that child. And yeah, so that's kind of like the process, if that lands.
It does. I think what's coming up for me when you're sharing this is it seems like this would be almost a never-ending, ongoing healing process. I'm going to say forever. Maybe folks can be fully healed all the time. I don't know. It seems like it would just be like this internal work for forever. And I'm curious, like, your perception of creating while you're still healing. You know what I mean? I think what I'm curious about with this whole conversation is I've come to terms recently that I'm a creator. I thought I was an entrepreneur for a long time. And then I realized that I just thought that sounded sexy because really deep down, I just wanted to create stuff. And so much of creativity is spirituality. And I'm so fascinated with that world and listening and channeling stuff and bringing things out to nothing, blah, blah, blah. But also, too, it's like karma. I also am going through a lot of inner healing and work. I just got in therapy for the first time and really uncovering some deep, deep, deep stuff that happened to me. But I'm also a creator. And it's like, do you put your life on pause to get healed? And then you can create, or how do you create from a pure place when there's still so much shit inside of you that needs healing? And I'm just curious your perception on that, because you're a maker. You're out there putting stuff in the world, but I'm sure you're going through your own healing all the time.
Well, so this answer is twofold. And first, I want to touch on the idea of, oh my gosh, this is going to last forever. This is right. And in some ways, right, it is, because we're human. And because being a human in this human experience is we're always going to have emotions. Life is always going to be some form of the full spectrum and 50-50. And we're going to have like amazing emotions and challenging emotions and life circumstances and things that come up. And that's a part of the beauty of being here, right?
Why?
And when you're looking at all of this work and it feels like there's so much to do, or when you're in the depth of uncovering your healing, it feels like you're going to be in it forever. And it feels almost counterproductive to what you want to do, create, and be in the world.
Right.
And I'm always going to be a steward of this work, and I'm always going to have, I'm sure, levels and layers and awakenings and all the things. But what I've also experienced in my life is that there does become a place or a time on this journey where there's a tipping point. So most people are going around with their wounds running the show, with their protective parts running the show. And it shows up in their work and in their business and in their relationships. And we can heal them to a certain degree, right? I had overcome a lot in the 5 years that I just like set my goals and like pushed myself and did the things, right? And yet I still had similar patterns that were showing. I'm like, why is this showing up in all of my relationships, even though I've quote unquote healed so much of my life on the outside? And so I was having these deeper patterns come up. So most people are running around with their wounds running the show. And so it's almost as if the wound is, if anybody's listening or watching this, I have my hands up. So the wound is the one that is foreground, right? Running the show. True self is like back here, like it's that intuition. It's that, oh, listen to me. Oh, go this way. And we're like, nope, not doing that. Nope. So the wound is foreground. What ends up happening is as you begin to feel the parts that never got felt, right? This wound that's really big, you feel and you start to heal it. And what happens is this gets a little smaller and the true self gets a little bigger. And then this gets a little smaller, the wound gets a little smaller, the true self gets a little bigger, because you come more and more and more into wholeness over time as you're uncovering, as you're practicing, as you're doing work. And then eventually there becomes a tipping point where, yes, a wound might still show up, right? I don't know if we're ever fully healed. I certainly haven't watched that. You still have triggers. But I'm more my true self, my adult self, my healed self. That's really, it would be called your big S self in IFS work, in parts work, becomes more foreground. So even when you get triggered, it's about, oh, wow, my reaction wasn't nearly as big this time. I can come back into my own center after just an hour instead of having this take me out for a week like it used to, right? Or you think of your emotions like a wave, or you think of life like a wave, it's about how much longer can I stay on the surfboard. To that point, there becomes a tipping point where, yes, we're probably human and we'll always be healing in some capacity and have triggers and those things. But there is a tipping point where you start to realize, actually, I'm grounded and I'm connected to myself and I'm connected to my intuition. And that's really what this does as well, is it reconnects you to the truth of who you are, your intuition, your soul. And so instead of operating from the head, so to answer your second question around like, how do I still create, right? So much of driving business is operating from the head and like, what decision should I make and what should I do and what should, like,
Yes.
right? And it takes a lot of mental energy. But when you're actually start to get more integrated with the truth of your soul, the truth of your knowing, there's like a slowness that happens that actually ends up speeding you up because you have more connection to the truth of the decisions you should make. What you should like the way that you should drive the business, the way that what you should create, the way that you should speak. Yeah, there's like a more of a connection and a touch point to your own truth, where there's like more of an ease because there's less chatter in the mind of what should I do. So for me, I create in seasons. So when I was doing the depth of my somatic healing work, I actually did take some time off from the podcast, which was really scary because that protective part of me was like, no, I have to always be pushing and forcing. And I'm so glad that I listened to the depth of my intuition that said, you are protected. You will be safe. The greatest joy of my life, and I believe my purpose on the planet, is to teach so much of this healing work that for me, in order to be in integrity with that, it's an absolute requirement that I walk the walk first for myself.
Right.
And because of that, I personally chose to take a little bit of time off. Doesn't mean that you have to. Everybody's journey is different. And I felt like it was going to last forever when I was in it. And it really lasted like a few months. So yeah. And I would say if you're a creator, like during that time, I was creating so much because I was just creating what wanted to come through my soul, but it wasn't for the purpose of sharing it. It wasn't for the purpose of hitting goals. It wasn't, I was creating for the sake of creating. And what I found is actually it's reconnected me to my true light, to my true essence. And I think it's that phrase of like, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And when we slow ourselves down to come more into wholeness and communion with our own soul and our own truth, we end up actually speeding ourselves up on the other side because of the depth from which we're coming and creating and expressing if we give ourselves the space. So yeah, that was my journey with it, at least.
Let's go a little deeper into that. I'm curious, what does it look like for you now? You know, you have your show, you host retreats, you coach, you're running a business and so forth. Like, what does it look like for you to operate from more of a slow place? I'm picturing in my head you in your kitchen and somebody asks to be on your show and you're just like, wait a couple of days to see how you feel about it. Like, is that literally what it is? Is you just take more time to make decisions, or what does that look like in practice now?
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good question. So not necessarily. I'm not just operating from like, how do I feel? Right. I still have deadlines. I still have things. But what it looks like on a day-to-day basis is that I'm much more self-boundaried with my energy and with the way that I operate with my phone, with my team, with and I will say I don't get it perfect all the time. But what my life used to look like is I would wake up, check my email, check Instagram, be like on the go, eating my food, like, you know, I was just it was infiltrating every part of my life. Like my business was my life, my life was my business. I didn't have self boundaries with like my phone, my energy, those kinds of things. Now what it looks like is before I go to create, before I get on a podcast, before I do anything in my business, I'm really self boundaried in the mornings with I do not check my phone. I do not check my email. I do not check social media. I will. I have my morning with connecting to myself, connecting with what is true. I work out and do those things, take my dog on a walk, all of that. And then I have a practice room in my house, and I will do my practices, my somatic practices. So anything rooted in breath, movement, and sound, depending on what it is that I need that day. And I will get connected to the truth of what's there. Some days I'm on fire. I'm ready to crush it. I'm excited. Some days I'm sad. Some days I don't feel like doing it and I have resistance. Doesn't mean I don't do it and I just let my feelings run the show. Instead, I see what's there. I feel the resistance. I breathe into it. I ask it what it needs. Like I really see what part of me is online that day. And I practice more in being in communion with my energy and what's there and what needs tending to. And then from there, and only then, do I create? Do I write? Do I get on video? And so I'm not operating from this frazzled place anymore. It's from a place that's more grounded and rooted. And I've found actually that my ability to create and make decisions speeds up because I've done the connecting with myself first, and I do it throughout the day, depending on what I need.
Remember at the beginning when I said there's something I wanted to ask you, and I'll ask you towards the end. Yeah. Here we are, folks.
Great.
Here we are.
Then
when I've been digging into your work and listening to your story and so forth, the phrase, I know you have a program about it, about self-sabotage, just really was glowing in my mind. I just was I really want to talk to her about that. And we went here, and I'm glad we went here, because what came up for me when you're talking is I know some folks who are always healing, and they're always putting their book on the back burner, their business on the back burner. They're always going to another retreat and all this stuff. And I'm on the other end where it's I feel I self-sabotage because I'm pushing everything away and just do. And it's different ends of the spectrum, but we're doing the exact same thing. And the self-sabotage thing's a really interesting topic for me, because it seems like it had to be so much self-awareness to know that the quote good thing we're doing, whether it's pushing your goals forward or healing a lot, is it a protective mechanism, or is it something that we're really doing to push us forward? Messy question, but if you just talk to me a little bit about how you help people recognize when they're self-sabotaging themselves, because we don't know we're doing it. We think we're doing something good, right?
It's all so personal and individualized. Right. And what I would say is, actually, if somebody's listening to that and even asking am I self-sabotaging and am I using this to avoid? If you ask that question, am I using this to avoid? And if you're even asking that, then you are probably something there for you, right? And like you said, that's two ends of the spectrum, right? So that could also be looked at as a hyper-masculinized and or hyper-feminized, right? So we need some more feminine energy, some more ability to feel in the overworking, over-pushing, hustling, right? And in the always healing, always being in these spaces, always reinvesting in the retreats is a way to avoid me actually doing the thing that I know that I need to do to move the needle forward on my life. Need more drive, provider, vision, bringing up more of that masculine energy. So again, it's finding the balance within the two and getting curious around the protective part. So if you felt something in your body when you heard that question of how do people know they're self-sabotaging if they're overworking or if they're always healing? And if that pinged you in some way, right? It can be really subtle, but oftentimes our intuition will be oh, or if you oh, I don't want to listen to that. Oh, I don't want to answer that. There's a resistance that comes up to that, right? There's actually a curiosity there that could be a protective part and a protective mechanism. So then we get to actually look at, hey, what are we avoiding? What are we afraid would happen if we slowed down, right? That's always working. What am I afraid would happen if I actually followed the dream that I want to pursue? Or, for somebody that's always healing, what am I afraid would happen if I stopped going to all of these retreats? If I stopped the perpetual healing cycle? Just starting to get curious and asking questions to that part of you that has the resistance or that is acting out of that certain adaptation of just starting to see what's there. What are you protecting me from?
Yeah.
Typically what you'll find is there will be a fear underneath there. And then we can get curious around what's that fear. And typically people don't want to feel what is there, right? They're avoiding a feeling. which again roots us back into learning how to feel. And once you know and trust yourself so fully that you can feel absolutely anything, you're unfuckwithable, because there's nothing that you're
You just say unfuckwithable?
withable. Yeah, like no one can fuck with it.
I've never heard anyone say that. That's hilarious.
I mean, it's true, right? Like if you trust yourself in every emotion and feeling every emotion, then there's nothing that you can't handle. And the power, there's so much power in that. Yeah.
Feeling, I have a lot of resistance when you talk about feeling. I'll just, again, being super honest with you, I know that's something that I'm not historically good at, and I know why and all this stuff. And it's just, I guess the question keeps coming up for me is like, why do we need to feel so much? Why? Like, why would I need to feel sad again for XYZ when maybe I've already cried about it? I'm sure people, you've already cried, you've already whatever. Wouldn't crying back then have healed you from it? Why do I need to feel it again at 37 years old? Do you know what I'm saying?
I love that. And
You're so nice. You say you love everything I'm asking.
hey,
No, because these are really, I'm like, help me, Rachel, what's going on?
wow. These are questions that so many people are going to have, and that I also had as well. So I'm really love that you're bringing this, because it's important, right? Because why would we? And I think here's what I'll say. You are 100% so fully satisfied, lit up, feeling so good in your life. Don't feel like you have any protective parts or like self-sabotaging parts that are coming out. Awesome. Like it sounds like you don't need to, right?
Yeah.
But if you're someone that knows deep down, oh, there's patterns that are still running the show. And even though I have like a lot of stuff over here that I love, that I've created, and I'm so proud of myself in so many ways, there's certain areas of my life where I still don't feel good enough, or I still am procrastinating, or I still am being a perfectionist, or I still am controlling, or I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm gripping, right? Whatever those things are. You notice that there's just, or even if if I get really quiet with myself at night, are there certain areas where I am unsatisfied in my life? Then we get to look at that, right? And there's a distinction here that I want to make, because I always believed, I'm a big crier. I'm a big emoter.
Oh, me too.
Right. So I always thought that I was someone who processed their feelings, because I'm like, well, I cried a lot, like I thought I had processed my father's death because I cried a bunch over it.
Right.
Well, I grieve. Like I'm good, except for my overindulgent side was coming out with drugs and alcohol, and my overworking side was coming out when I stopped the drugs. Like all of these adaptations were happening. And there's a difference between crying and showing emotion and actually processing the emotion.
Oh boy.
So yeah. So just because we cried, or just because we're a person that shows big emotions, oftentimes our emotions can come out sideways. It doesn't actually mean that we processed it from the depths of the part of ourselves that was wounded in the moment. And so feels like a really heavy, daunting task, and like people don't want to go there. And it actually, you won't be stuck in it forever if you have the willingness to actually go there and to feel. And I would say the roadmap is your own intuition of, if you notice that there are places where you don't feel whole, or don't feel, or just like there are areas of your life that you're don't love the way that you're showing up, or the way that they are unfolding. That would be maybe an indicator that this could be something that could maybe be supportive.
I'm going to jack this quote up, but Elizabeth Gilbert said something along the lines of, when there is a God, she used the word God, she used the word like divine, some kind of spiritual hole, the only thing that can fill it is the divine. If there's a divine size hole, the only thing that can fulfill it is the divine. And I thought that was an interesting quote. And I was wondering with you, to wrap it back to the very beginning, when you said that you used to be an atheist, do you believe in God now?
Yeah. And I never would have used the word God before, maybe this past year. But I use that interchangeably with God, source, the universe. I believe in a benevolent spirit and energy that exists in all things and exists inside of all of us. And for me, it's simply consciousness, and it's love. And I think all of this journey can be summed up in just knowing that we're all just returning back to love. And so that's what I believe in.
Then when we all get there, we're all going to laugh at all these previous selves, and because it's all probably a big joke we're going to laugh at one day. Hopefully. Listen, you are a light in this world. I have a final question for you, but I just want to thank you so much for your time, your energy, your heart. You didn't have to say yes to some Southern Georgia girl that you don't even know and spending an hour of your time with her and all the incredible work you're doing in this world. So thank you so much. Where do you want to direct our listeners to if they need help, support? They're like, oh my God, I've got to feel some things. How can they get Rachel's help?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Heather. You can follow me on all platforms at Rachel Gibler. I'm on Instagram, TikTok too, but I primarily hang out on Instagram. Or you can listen to my podcast, It's Fucking Spiritual. I break down a lot of these concepts, make them real, raw, relatable, give you tips for your life. I've got some programs around this too, so definitely shoot me a DM and let me know how it all lands for you.
All that will be linked in the show notes. Very last question. What is something you are deeply questioning right now that you do not have the answer to?
I love this. Okay. I would say right now it's how exactly to fully dance in my masculine and feminine energy. Like I'm still on this ride and it's been beautiful and it's been a challenge and it's something that I still haven't fully figured out how to balance. So honestly, what I teach is still what I'm growing through.
I'm so glad you answered that way. That is so empowering when people can say, I don't know, because it gives us all permission to ask more questions and be where we're at, with it. So thanks, Rachel. You're the bomb. Sit.
Thanks so much, Heather.